Commander Jaiwin Kim pressed her hand against the cold glass of the viewing window. Outside, stars moved slowly past like tiny lights in the darkness. The massive ship Harmony had been traveling through space for over 200 years. Inside its metal walls, 40 million people slept in special frozen chambers, dreaming of new worlds they would never see with their own eyes. "Commander, all systems are working perfectly," said Lieutenant Minseek Park. His voice echoed in the almost empty control room. Only 12 people were awake on the entire ship. The rest slept in the cold, waiting for machines to wake them up when they reached their new home. Jaiwin looked at the list on her tablet. Soon, she would join the millions of sleeping people. After 18 months of watching over the ship, it was her turn to sleep for 100 years. Another group of people would wake up and take care of things while she dreamed. "Any problems out there?" she asked, pointing toward the window. Minseek shook his head. "Nothing strange, Commander. Space looks peaceful. No other ships. No signals. Just stars and empty darkness." Jaiwin nodded, but something felt wrong. The galaxy was too quiet, too empty. Where were all the other races they had heard about on Earth? Where were the traders, the explorers, the travelers who should be moving between the stars? She did not know that far away, in a different part of the galaxy, terrible things were happening. Giant black warships moved through space like hungry monsters. These ships belonged to the Kithara, a race of creatures that looked like giant insects. They had hard shells on their bodies and 6 legs, but they walked upright like humans. Their leader, Warlord Beck, stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching a beautiful water world die. "Fire the death rays again," Beck ordered. His voice was like metal scraping against metal. Below them, the planet Aquatica Prime was covered in oceans. In those oceans lived the Zephyrians, peaceful creatures who spent their time making art and studying the stars. They had never built weapons of war. Red beams of energy shot down from the Kithara ships. Where they touched the water, everything died. Fish floated to the surface. The beautiful crystal cities under the waves cracked and fell apart. The Zephyrians tried to escape, but there was nowhere to go. "Sir," said Subcommander Nari, pointing at a screen, "we are still getting signals from those strange ships in Sector 7. Should we check them out?" Warlord Beck looked at the display. It showed the human fleet moving slowly through empty space. The ships were huge, but they were not sending any messages. The machines showed almost no life on board. No weapons were powered up. No shields were active. "Just garbage," Beck said, waving one of his 4 arms. "Old ships with no one alive inside. Mark them on our maps and forget about them. We have real enemies to fight." The Kithara had been conquering the galaxy for 200 years. They had learned that fear was the best weapon. When they destroyed one planet, 10 others would surrender without fighting. They would broadcast videos of burning cities and dying people to every world in their path. Most races would give up before the first shot was fired. But the Kithara had never met humans before. Back on the Harmony, Jaiwin walked through the quiet hallways toward her sleeping chamber. The walls were white and clean. Soft lights guided her path. She passed window after window, showing the great sleeping halls. Thousands of people lay in glass boxes, frost covering their faces. They looked peaceful, like they were having good dreams. She stopped at one window and looked inside. A young man about her age slept inside a frosted chamber. His name tag read, Dr. Taeyoung Lee, Colony Medical Officer. He would wake up in 100 years to help build hospitals on a new world. He had no idea that when he opened his eyes, the galaxy would be full of screams. Jaiwin reached her own sleeping chamber. The machine was ready for her. She looked back one more time at the control room, where Minseek was checking the computers. Everything looked normal, safe, peaceful. She climbed into the cold chamber and closed her eyes. The machine began to work, slowly freezing her body and slowing her heart. Her last thought was about the new world they were flying toward. Would it have blue skies? Green grass? Would her children play in fields of flowers under a warm sun? The machine finished its work. Commander Jaiwin Kim joined the 40 million dreamers, sleeping peacefully while their ships sailed to the dark toward a galaxy at war. Far away, Warlord Beck was planning his next attack. The Dendron Federation had already sent messages saying they wanted surrender. The Vordak Empire was building statues of Kithra leaders in their cities. The Luminar Collective was offering to serve as slaves. Fear ruled the galaxy. No one fought back anymore. No one remembered what freedom meant. But in the cold darkness of space, automated systems on human ships made small changes to their course. They moved away from the war zones, protecting their sleeping cargo. The machines did not know they were saving humanity's last hope. The sleeping giants drifted onward, carrying dreams of better worlds while nightmare ruled the stars around them. 50 years had passed since the human ships disappeared into the dark corners of space. The galaxy had changed completely. Black and red flags now flew over 400 star systems. The Kithra Dominion ruled everything, and their hunger for conquest never stopped. Their newest target was the Aquarian Coalition, a group of water-breathing people who lived in the deep oceans of 12 beautiful worlds. The Aquarians had never built weapons. They spent their time painting with light, singing songs that could heal broken hearts, and growing medicine from coral that could cure any disease. They believed all life was sacred. Tide singer Hannah floated in the great meeting chamber of New Coral, the capital city built inside a massive underwater mountain. Around her, the other leaders of her people watched horror unfold on their viewing screens. The Kithra fleet had arrived 3 days ago, and what they were doing was worse than simple conquest. "They are not just taking our worlds," whispered Elder Doyen. The old Aquarian's light patches flickered with fear. "They want to break our spirits." The screen showed terrible things. Kithra ships were dropping poison into the oceans, turning the crystal-clear water into green sludge. The beautiful coral cities were being smashed by bombs dropped from space. But the worst part was the camps. The Kithra were capturing survivors and forcing them to work until they died. Then they would take pictures and send them to every world in the galaxy. "Look at this," said Counselor Mira, her voice shaking. She pointed to a new broadcast. "They are making other races watch what happens to those who resist." The broadcast showed Aquarian children being separated from their parents. It showed the great libraries being burned. It showed Kithra soldiers laughing as they destroyed a hospital full of sick people. At the end of the broadcast, a message appeared in dozens of languages. "This is what happens to those who do not submit to the Dominion." Across the galaxy, the message was working perfectly. The Vordak Crystalline Empire, whose people were made of living diamond, sent their surrender before the Kithra ships even reached their space. The energy-based Luminar Collective offered to serve as slaves in exchange for not being destroyed. The plant-like Dendron Federation began building temples to worship Kithra leaders. War Master Gina stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Terror of Stars. Her black armor was covered in scars from 100 battles. Her 6 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she watched another Aquarian city surrender without firing a shot. "Fear is better than any weapon," she told her officers. "Why waste energy fighting when the enemy destroys himself with terror?" Captain Kyung, her second-in-command, pointed at the tactical display. "The other Aquarian worlds are already sending surrender messages. The Coral Guard has laid down their weapons. Their government is offering to pay tribute." Gina clicked her mandibles together in what passed for a smile among her kind. "Good. Mark this conquest as complete. Send the recordings to the next sector. Let them see what resistance costs." But resistance was already dying across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Mechanos, the robot people dismantled their own weapons factories and offered them as gifts to the Dominion. On the farming world of Redania, the peaceful plant growers poisoned their own crops rather than let the Kithra take them by force. The terror campaign was working too well. Entire civilizations were surrendering at the first sight of a black ship on their sensors. The Kithra had created a galaxy where hope was more dangerous than any weapon. In the ruins of the Great Aquarian Library on Pearl World, an old historian named Sung Ho hid in the flooded basement. He was one of the few who remembered the old stories, the legends of warrior races who once fought against impossible odds. He whispered to himself as he carved words into a piece of coral. There must be someone out there who still remembers how to fight, someone who will not kneel. But even he was losing hope. The broadcast showed the same pattern everywhere. A Kithra fleet would arrive. They would show videos of previous conquests. The local government would surrender immediately. Any who resisted would be made examples for the next world. The Kithra had turned conquest into an art form. They barely needed to fire their weapons anymore. The fear did all the work for them. Deep in space, far from the war zones and surrender ceremonies, the human fleet continued its slow journey. Automated systems adjusted course again to avoid a Kithra patrol route. In their sleeping chambers, 40 million humans dreamed of new worlds, unaware that the galaxy they were traveling toward had forgotten what freedom looked like. On the bridge of the sleeping ship, New Dawn, robot systems recorded everything. Every surrender broadcast, every cry for help, every world that fell without a fight. The computers stored it all, waiting for the day when human eyes would see what their galaxy had become. War Master Gina received reports of 12 more systems offering immediate surrender. She barely looked at them anymore. Conquest had become boring when no one fought back. She longed for the old days when enemies would at least try to resist before being crushed. Perhaps we should find new galaxies to conquer, she told her staff. This one has grown too tame. She had no idea that somewhere in the darkness, sleeping giants were slowly waking up, and they had never learned the meaning of surrender. 150 years after the Kithra began their rule of terror, the first human ship finally reached its destination. The New Dawn slowly entered the Kepler, 438 system, its engines humming softly after centuries of travel. Deep inside the ship, machines began their work. Warm air flowed through frozen chambers. Hearts that had not beaten for 100 years started pumping again. Captain Taeyong Lee opened his eyes for the first time since Earth was young. The world felt strange and cold. His muscles were weak from the long sleep, but his mind was sharp. He pulled himself out of the sleeping chamber and looked around. Other people were waking up too, coughing and shivering as life returned to their bodies. "Status report," he said, his voice rough from not being used. Lieutenant Yunji Song was already at the communications station, her fingers moving over the controls. She had been a communications expert on Earth, trained to make contact with new alien races. But what she was hearing now made her face turn pale. "Captain, I am picking up thousands of broadcasts, but they are not normal messages. They are..." She stopped and swallowed hard. "They are surrender messages. Hundreds of different species are begging someone called the Kithra Dominion for mercy." Taeyong moved to her station and listened to the recordings. His blood grew cold as he heard the fear in alien voices. Species after species was offering everything they had to avoid being destroyed. Some were offering their children as slaves. Others were destroying their own cities to prove they would not fight back. "How long have these messages been broadcasting?" he asked. "Some of them for over a century, sir. It looks like the entire galaxy is under control of this Kithra Dominion." Navigator Sung-hoon looked up from his instruments. His face was white with shock. "Captain, I cannot find any free worlds. Not one. Every system in our database is sending loyalty messages to the Kithra." Taeyong studied the star maps on the main screen. Red markers showed Kithra territory. It covered everything they could see. The green markers that should have shown free worlds were completely gone. "Sir," whispered Yunji, "what kind of galaxy did we wake up in?" But Taeyong was not just any ship captain. He had been trained at Earth's finest military school. His teachers had taught him about every war in human history. They had drilled one lesson into him over and over. Humans never surrender. Not to tyrants. Not to monsters. Not even when death seemed certain. "Show me everything we know about these Kithra," he ordered. For the next 6 hours, the crew studied the intercepted messages. They learned about the terror campaigns, the mass executions, the way entire civilizations have been broken without a real fight. They saw videos of beautiful worlds turned into smoking ruins, of proud races reduced to begging slaves. "They rule through fear," said Medical Officer Gina Park. "They do not need to destroy everyone. They just need to make examples. The fear does the rest." "But sir," said Yunji, "we only have one ship, 50,000 people. How can we fight an empire that controls the entire galaxy?" Taeyong looked at the tactical display again. The human fleet was scattered across light years of space, with 200 ships carrying 40 million sleeping people. Each ship had weapons, but they were designed for exploration and defense, not galactic war. Then he smiled, and his officers saw something in that smile that made them stand straighter. It was the same smile their ancestors had worn when facing impossible odds. The same smile that had taken humans from caves to the stars. "We wake them up," he said simply. "All of them." "Sir, that will wake 40 million people across 200 ships," Yunji protested. "The emergency awakening protocol has never been used. We do not even know if it will work." "Lieutenant, let me tell you something about humans," Taeyong said, walking to the communications console. "We have fought tyrants on every continent of Earth. We have stood against empires that seemed impossible to defeat. We have never, in our entire history, knelt to bullies." He placed his hand on the emergency transmission button. "And we are not going to start now." The message went out instantly, racing through quantum channels to every human ship in space. In sleeping chambers across the fleet, red lights began flashing. Emergency systems hummed to life. 40 million people who had been dreaming of new worlds and peaceful futures began their journey back to wakefulness. On the Harmony, the ship where Commander Jaewon Kim had been sleeping, machines pumped warm air into frozen chambers. Her heart began beating faster. Her eyes moved under closed lids as dreams gave way to reality. Far away, a Kithra sensor station detected the unusual transmission burst. For the first time in decades, the silent ships were talking to each other. Officer Miho, monitoring long-range communications, turned to his commander. "Sir, those ghost ships we have been tracking, they just sent out some kind of signal." War Master Gina was in her private chambers when the report reached her. She had been bored for years, dealing with enemies who surrendered before she could even enjoy a good fight. This news made her 6 eyes brighten with interest. "Finally, something new," she said, rising from her chair. "Prepare a contact fleet. Let us see how quickly these newcomers learn to fear us." She had conquered 1,000 worlds. She had broken the spirits of entire civilizations. She had never met an enemy that did not eventually beg for mercy. She was about to learn what happened when unstoppable force met immovable object. 6 months passed as the Great Awakening continued across the human fleet. 40 million people opened their eyes to find themselves in a galaxy they did not recognize. The stars were the same, but everything else had changed. Where they had expected to find peaceful civilizations and new friends, they found only fear and slavery. Admiral Soo-young Cho was the first to fully understand what had happened. She had been sleeping for over a century, dreaming of the day when humans would join a peaceful galactic community. Instead, she woke up to reports of genocide, terror campaigns, and entire species reduced to trembling slaves. "How many worlds are free?" she asked during her first briefing. Intelligence Commander Hyung-woo looked down at his reports. "None, Admiral. 0. Every inhabited system we can detect is under Kithra control or paying tribute to avoid destruction." Admiral Cho was quiet for a long moment. She had studied Earth's history, had learned about tyrants and dictators who thought they could rule forever. But this was different. This was an entire galaxy that had forgotten how to fight. "Then we remind them," she said finally. "We show them what they have forgotten." The first test came sooner than expected. A Kithra expeditionary fleet, led by Commander Nian, detected human ships in the Kepler 442 system. Nian had conquered 47 worlds without losing a single ship. Her method was simple. Arrive with overwhelming force, broadcast videos of previous conquests, and wait for the enemy to surrender. She approached the human battle group Defiance with complete confidence. The humans had only 6 ships. Her fleet had 24, including heavy cruisers with planet-killing weapons. "Send them the standard surrender demand," she ordered. "Show them what happened to the Aquarians when they resisted. These newcomers will kneel within the hour." But the human response was not what she expected. Instead of fear or negotiation, she received a 2-word message that her translation computer struggled to understand. "Get bent." "What does that mean?" asked her second-in-command. "I believe it means they refuse to surrender," Nian replied, confused. "No one has done that in 50 years. She decided to demonstrate Kithra power. Her ships fired warning shots across the human formation, energy beams that could slice through asteroids. Surely these newcomers would understand the message. Instead, the human ships did something impossible. They attacked. The battle that followed changed everything. The humans fought like nothing the Kithra had ever seen. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed to dance around Kithra fire. They used weapons the Kithra had never encountered. Solid metal rods fired at incredible speed that punched through energy shields like they were paper. Most shocking of all, when Kithra's ships were damaged, the humans did not offer mercy. When Kithra officers tried to surrender, the humans ignored them and kept fighting. These strange beings seemed to believe that some things were worth dying for. Captain Mingyu, commanding the human ship Freedom, coordinated the attack with cold precision. His ship was smaller than the Kithra vessels, but it moved like a living thing, dodging between enemy fire while its weapons found weak spots in Kithra armor. "Target their command ship," he ordered. "Let them know this is just the beginning." The Kithra expected the battle to last minutes. Instead, it lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 12 Kithra ships were destroyed or crippled. The humans lost 3 vessels and 8,000 people. But they had done something unthinkable. They had forced a Kithra retreat. Commander Nian fled the system with her remaining ships, her mind reeling. In 200 years of conquest, no Kithra fleet had ever retreated. Her officers stared at her in shock, unsure what to do. But the humans were not finished. They broadcast the entire battle across every communication channel in the galaxy. They sent videos of Kithra's ships burning, of the mighty Terror fleet running away like frightened children. On New Coral, ancient tide singer Hannah watched the broadcast with tears in her eyes. She was over 200 years old now, one of the few Aquarians who remembered life before the Kithra. She had survived the terror campaigns, the slave camps, the long years of hopelessness. "They fought back," she whispered to the other survivors gathered around her. After all these years, someone finally fought back. The video spread like wildfire through the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 slave camps, people saw something they had not seen in generations. Kithra's ships fleeing from an enemy that refused to kneel. War Master Gina watched the reports from her flagship with growing alarm. She had built an empire on the belief that terror was stronger than courage, that fear could break any enemy. But these humans seemed to have no fear at all. "How is this possible?" she demanded. "Every species learns to fear us. Every species surrenders when they see our power." Her intelligence officer, Teijin, studied the human transmissions. "They keep sending the same message, War Master. They say they would rather die as free beings than live as slaves." Gina had heard such words before, in the early days of conquest. But those brave speeches always ended in surrender when the real killing began. These humans were different. They had seen Kithra power and chosen to fight anyway. For the first time in her long life, War Master Gina felt something she had never experienced before. Something cold and unfamiliar crawled through her mind as she realized the truth. She was afraid. What started as one battle became something much bigger. The video of humans defeating the Kithra spread to every corner of the galaxy. For the first time in over a century, people began to whisper a word they had almost forgotten: revolution. The humans did not want to become new masters of the galaxy. Instead, they offered something no one had seen before: partnership between equals. Admiral Suyang Cho sent messages to every enslaved world with a simple promise: "We will teach you to fight. We will give you weapons. But we will never rule over you." On the water world of New Coral, Tide Singer Hannah called together the surviving Aquarian leaders. She was very old now, but her voice was strong as she spoke to her people. "The humans offer us something we lost long ago," she said. "They offer us hope. But hope means nothing without courage. Are we ready to fight for our freedom?" The Aquarians have been peaceful for centuries, but they remembered their anger. They remembered their children taken as slaves, their cities destroyed, their culture nearly wiped out. When human ships arrived with weapons and training, the Aquarians learned to fight with the fury of storms. Across the galaxy, the same thing was happening. The crystal people of Vorthak discovered they could use their natural abilities to shatter enemy ships from the inside. The Luminar Collective, Beings made of pure energy learned to disrupt Kithra computers and weapons. The plant-like Dendron Federation grew poisonous thorns that could pierce Kithra armor. But the real weapon was not technology or tactics. It was something the galaxy had not felt in generations: the belief that freedom was possible. Commander Jaiwin Kim, now serving as chief strategist for the human fleet, coordinated the liberation campaigns from the bridge of the flagship Unity. Around her worked beings from dozens of different species, all united by one goal. The Kithra are pulling their forces back to their home systems, reported Captain Biamsik, a young human who had become an expert on alien warfare. They cannot fight on 1,000 fronts at once. Good, Jaiwin replied, studying the tactical displays. But we cannot let them regroup. It is time to end this. The final battle came at Kithra Prime, the dark world where the insect-like conquerors had built their empire. The Allied fleet that approached the planet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans fighting alongside Aquarians, Vorthack crystal ships supporting Luminar energy beings, Dendron plant ships growing new weapons as they flew. War Master Gina stood on the bridge of her last remaining super battleship, watching the approaching fleet with 6 eyes full of rage and fear. Her empire was crumbling. Her terror tactics had failed completely against enemies who refused to be terrified. We can still destroy them, growled her captain, Hybin. Our planet killer weapons can crack their ships like eggs. But Gina was no longer sure. These allies had survived every weapon, every tactic, every terror that had broken thousands of species before them. They seemed to grow stronger with each battle, as if fighting for freedom gave them power she could not understand. The battle for Kithra Prime lasted 3 days. Ships burned in space like falling stars. Entire fleets were destroyed on both sides. But slowly, steadily, the Allied forces pushed toward the dark planet where centuries of tyranny had been born. On the final day, Admiral Cho faced a choice that would echo through history. The combined Allied fleet had enough firepower to destroy Kithra Prime completely. They could turn the planet into dust and ash, ensuring that the Kithra could never threaten the galaxy again. "We have them," reported Commander Jaiwin, her voice tired from days of battle. "Their defenses are broken. Their fleet is destroyed. We can end this now." Admiral Cho stood in the command center of the Unity, surrounded by beings from dozens of worlds. All of them had suffered under Kithra rule. All of them had lost family, friends, entire civilizations to the terror campaigns. "Admiral," said Tide Singer Hannah, who had lived to see this moment despite her great age, "my people demand justice for what was done to us." "As do mine," said Crystal Lord Yunho of the Vorthack. "And mine," added Energy Dancer Sajin of the Luminar Collective. Admiral Cho looked at the tactical display, showing the defeated Kithra homeworld. She thought about all the worlds that had been destroyed, all the people who had died, all the centuries of suffering these insect creatures had caused. "No," she said finally, and her voice carried to every ship in the Allied fleet. "We did not fight to become the monsters we defeated. We fought to prove there is a better way. The Kithra were defeated, but they were not destroyed. Their war criminals were put on trial. Their weapons were taken away. But they were allowed to live, forced to learn something completely foreign to their nature, how to exist without conquering others." 5 years later, new generation ships launched from hundreds of worlds. These vessels carried mixed crews from every species in the galaxy, heading toward unexplored regions where they could build something that had never existed before, a truly free galactic civilization. Standing on the observation deck of the ship New Hope, former slave Hannah worked alongside former enemy Captain Taeyun, planning colonies where all beings could live as equals. "Your people gave us the greatest gift," she told him as they watched the stars. "What gift was that?" "You taught us to dream of freedom again." The galaxy had awakened from its long nightmare, and every world could finally sleep in peace.